The morning my wife packed her bags, I was making pancakes. That detail matters somehow. The ordinary domesticity of it. The way the kitchen smelled of butter and maple syrup. The Sunday morning light coming through the window above the sink in long golden strips. I remember thinking, standing at the stove with a spatula in my hand, that this was the kind of morning that belongs on a greeting card. The kind of morning that makes you feel, briefly, like your life is exactly what it should be. I was wrong about that, but I didn't know it yet. My name is Callum Reeves. I'm 41 years old, a civil engineer who designs water infrastructure for a living. Dams, flood systems, the invisible architecture that keeps cities from drowning. I've spent my career calculating load tolerances and stress thresholds, understanding precisely how much pressure any given structure can absorb before it fails. I thought I understood something about limits. I thought I knew where mine were. I didn't know anything. I heard the bag before I saw it. That particular sound, the rumble of wheels on hardwood, is something I will not forget for the rest of my life, because it was the sound of everything I thought I knew about my life being quietly revised. Sarah appeared in the kitchen doorway. She was wearing the kind of outfit you wear when you want to look like you aren't trying. Dark jeans, a cream blouse, her dark hair loose. She was 38 and beautiful, in a way that had only deepened in the 7 years we'd been together, 5 of them married. A roller bag sat behind her in the hallway like a patient waiting thing. "I'm heading out for a few days," she said, and her voice had that careful neutrality that I recognized, only later, as rehearsed. "I'll be back Wednesday." I flipped a pancake. "Where to?" A pause. In 12 years of engineering work, I have learned that a pause is never nothing. A pause in a calculation means you've hit a variable you haven't accounted for. A pause in a structural report means someone isn't sure the numbers are right. A pause in a marriage, when your wife is standing in the kitchen doorway with a packed bag, means you are about to hear something that will require the full capacity of every coping mechanism you possess. I'm meeting Dominic. The spatula stopped moving. Dominic Farr, the ex. The one she'd been with for 2 years before we met. The architect. The man whose framed photographs had lived on her bookshelf when I first visited her apartment, and who she had described, in the early warmth of our relationship, as someone she cared for but had simply outgrown. Dominic, who sent her a birthday message every year that she showed me openly and laughed off. Dominic, who she had run into at a conference 14 months ago and mentioned casually over dinner. "Just saw an old friend today." The kind of thing that, when your marriage is healthy, means nothing at all. We had not been healthy for some time. "Dominic," I said. My voice was completely level. I was, in that moment, astonished by my own voice. "We've been talking. I know how this sounds. Like you're going on a trip to spend several days with your ex-boyfriend." "Callum." "Is that what this is, Sarah? Just so I'm clear on the terminology." She straightened slightly. Here it was, the part she had braced for. The argument, the raised voices, the demand for explanations, the fracture point where I would either rage or beg, and either way she would have the confirmation of something. That I was controlling, that I was emotionally volatile. That I was the problem, the reason she needed to go find something elsewhere. I could see her standing in that doorway with her quiet, prepared expression, and I understood, with a clarity that hit me like cold water, that she had rehearsed this, that she had mapped the confrontation in her mind and decided exactly how it would go. I turned the burner off. I set the spatula down on the counter. I walked past her into the hallway, crouched down beside the roller bag, and unzipped the main compartment. She turned, watching me, the prepared expression beginning to dissolve around the edges into something unreadable. "What are you?" "You forgot your grey pullover," I said. "The merino one. It's going to be cold this week. Temperatures are dropping Thursday." I went to the closet, found the pullover folded on the shelf where she always kept it, brought it back and tucked it into the bag with careful hands. Then I zipped it closed. I stood up. I looked at her. "Have a safe trip," I said. "You don't need to come back Wednesday, or at all, if that's what you want." The silence that followed was unlike any silence I had experienced in 5 years of marriage. Sarah stared at me. The prepared expression was entirely gone now, replaced by something raw and genuinely startled. A woman who had walked into a room expecting a specific kind of weather and found the sky an entirely different color. "You're being serious," she said. "I am." "You're not going to say anything else?" I thought about it honestly, standing there in the hallway of the apartment we'd chosen together, in front of the mirror we'd argued about hanging for 3 weeks, beneath the light fixture she'd picked out from a catalogue at midnight one Tuesday and shown me, triumphant, on her phone. I thought about everything I could say. The anger was there, absolutely, burning somewhere below the surface of the calm like a fault line under still ground. But the anger wasn't the truest thing I felt. The truest thing was something older and more quiet. "I think we've both known for a while," I said. "I just needed to see whether you'd made a decision. Now I have." I stepped back toward the kitchen. "Close the door on your way out." She stood in the hallway for a long time after that. Then I heard the front door open and close, and the apartment was very, very quiet. I sat down at the kitchen table and ate the pancakes I'd made. They were good. I noticed that detail, that they were genuinely good, and something about it felt important in a way I couldn't entirely articulate. The ordinary continuing, the body still needing to eat, the light still coming through the window. I did not fall apart. I want to be precise about that, because I think people expect a particular kind of collapse to follow a moment like that, and it didn't come, not in the way you'd imagine. I sat at that table for a long time, very still, doing what I'd always done with structural problems, examining the load points, finding where the weight had been accumulating, tracing the failure back not to the moment of fracture, but to the stress that had been building for months, years perhaps, quietly and invisibly, until the structure finally said enough. I was sad. I want to be honest. I was deeply, thoroughly sad in a way that had no drama in it, which is perhaps the most painful kind. Not the hot grief of sudden loss, but the cooler, wider grief of recognizing something that has been ending for a long time. I called my brother, Reese, in the afternoon. Told him briefly what had happened. "Do you want me to come over?" he asked. "No, I'm okay." "Are you actually okay, or are you performing okay?" "Both, probably." I looked at the window. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know the specific shape of it. "What will you do?" "I don't know yet. I'll figure it out." That was the honest answer. I had no plan beyond the present moment, and the present moment was survivable, and sometimes that is enough. The twist came on day 5. I had not heard from Sarah. I had not texted her, and she had not texted me, and I had spent those 5 days existing carefully inside the quiet, going to work, reviewing a drainage project for a new development outside the city, cooking for one, sleeping adequately. My colleague Marcus Webb had noticed something was different in my manner, and asked me about it with the blunt directness that made him simultaneously difficult and irreplaceable to work with. "You look like a man who's made a decision he hasn't fully processed yet," Marcus said, dropping a file on my desk without ceremony. "Accurate." "Sarah?" "Yes." He sat down across from me without being invited, which was also his way. Marcus was 53, twice divorced, and had the particular wisdom of a man who had failed at personal relationships enough times to have learned something true from the failure. "You want to talk about it?" "Not especially." "Good, because I'm not a therapist." He tapped the file. "Look at the drainage report. There's something in the northeast quadrant that isn't adding up." I appreciated him enormously in that moment. It was at 7 that evening, sitting in my car in the parking garage below the office, rather than going home, because the apartment felt particularly airless, that my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered it out of the unfocused automaticity of someone who has been numb for 5 days. "Is this Callum Reeves?" A man's voice. Controlled, but with something tight underneath it. "Speaking." "My name is Reed Nakamura." A pause. "I believe your wife and my wife have been spending a great deal of time together recently." I sat forward in the driver's seat. "Who is your wife?" I asked slowly. "Her name is Neera. She told me she was visiting her sister in Portland this week." Another pause, carefully weighted. "She wasn't in Portland. I don't know exactly where she was, but I tracked a card transaction this morning to a hotel in Ashford, which is about 40 minutes south of here," I said quietly. "Yes." A breath. "Callum, do you know a man named Dominic Farray?" The garage was very still around me. The fluorescent lights hummed. "He's my wife's ex-boyfriend," I said. "She told me she was going to see him." The silence on the other end of the line lasted approximately 4 seconds, and in those 4 seconds I watched the shape of everything I thought I understood shift and reconfigure into something entirely different. "Dominic Farray," Reed said carefully, "is my wife's ex-boyfriend as well. We met the following morning at a coffee place near the river called Helix. Neutral ground," Reed had said, with the dry pragmatism of a man who has also learned something about keeping his composure. He was perhaps 45, Korean-American, with close-cut grey at his temples and the quiet, observational manner of someone who misses very little. He worked in forensic accounting, which explained the card transaction tracking, and, I suspected, much else about how he was navigating this. We shook hands with the formal courtesy of two people meeting under circumstances that have no established social protocol. "I want to be clear about something," Reed said, before we'd even ordered coffee. "I'm not here to speculate or assign blame. I'm here because I have information and because I think you deserve to have it too." "What information?" He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and placed a folded piece of paper on the table between us. A printed screenshot. Email thread, partial. Enough to read the relevant portions. I read it. I read it twice. Then I set it back on the table and looked at the wall for a moment. The email thread was between Sarah and Neera, Reed's wife, apparently a close friend of Sarah's from years before either marriage. The content, sanitized to its essential meaning, was this: that Dominic was not a former lover being revisited out of nostalgia or loneliness. Dominic was the mutual point of a triangle that had been operating, with varying degrees of awareness and deliberateness, for at least 18 months. Neera had reconnected with him first. Sarah had reconnected with him through Neera. The trip to Ashford had been coordinated between all three parties. I am an engineer. I deal in systems, in how components interact, how forces distribute, how structures hold or fail. Reading that email thread was like examining a load diagram and finally understanding where the hidden stress had been concentrated all along. "How long have you known?" I asked Reed. "Since Tuesday." He wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. "I've spent 4 days figuring out what to do with it." "And you decided to call me?" "I decided that the information belonged to you." He paused. "What you do with it is your own business." I looked at him carefully. "How are you doing with it?" He blinked slightly, perhaps not expecting the question. "I've been better," he said, and then, almost despite himself, "I've also been worse in other ways. Neera and I have been struggling for 2 years. I'm not saying that as an excuse for what she did. I'm saying it because I think the honest version of this is complicated." He looked out at the river through the window. "We have a daughter. She's 6. Her name is Lyra." He said the name differently from the rest of it, softer, with a weight that was entirely its own. That changes the math. Yes, I said, and I meant it simply. We sat for nearly 2 hours. We talked about the specific geography of what it feels like to be a man who prides himself on understanding systems, on reading the indicators correctly, on anticipating failure, and who failed entirely to anticipate this. That particular species of humiliation. The way you audit your own memory, replaying moments and conversations looking for the signs you should have seen, the variables you misread or ignored. There was a conference she mentioned, I said at one point, 14 months ago. She ran into Dominic. She told me about it openly, laughed about it. Nira mentioned a conference too, Reed said. Different one, or possibly the same one. You think the openness was deliberate? I think the openness was cover. People who are concealing something significant sometimes give you small, transparent pieces of it. It creates a sense that they aren't hiding anything, because look, they told you. He said it without bitterness, with the precision of a man who has processed something until it became legible. I've seen it in financial fraud cases. Transparency as misdirection. I stared at the table. That's a dark way to look at it. It's an accurate way to look at it. A pause. I don't say it to be dark. I say it because understanding what actually happened is the only way I know how to get past it. I looked at him. Are you thinking about staying? With Naira? He was quiet for a long moment. I think about Lyra, he said finally. I think about what kind of father I am if I stay, and what kind of father I am if I go, and both answers are complicated, and I don't have a clean version of this yet. Hay met my eyes. Do you? No, I said. I told Sarah not to come back. I meant it when I said it. I still think I mean it. I paused. But meaning something and having processed it fully are different things. Yes, Reed said, they are. She called on day 8. I was at the desk in my home office. The drainage plans spread out in front of me, the city dark and wet outside the window. I looked at her name on the screen for 3 full rings. Then I answered. Callum. Her voice was different from how I'd last heard it. The careful, rehearsed quality was gone, replaced by something raw and unsteady. I need to talk to you. All right. A silence. That's all you're going to say? All right. I'm listening, Sarah. What do you want to say? I heard her exhale shakily. I didn't expect you to. I thought you would fight me. I thought you would tell me to come home, or that you were angry, or... She stopped. The way you packed my bag. The way you said I didn't have to come back. A pause. It scared me more than anything you could have shouted. I know, I said quietly. Does that matter to you, that it scared me? I thought about the question for a moment, giving it the honesty it deserved. Not in the way you might want it to. Another silence. Longer. I made a mistake, she said. I know that too. I want to come home. I looked at the drainage plans, at the careful blue lines of the infrastructure design, all those invisible systems designed to carry water safely away from places it would cause damage, to channel and redirect the forces that would otherwise overwhelm the structure. Months of work. Years of learning to think this way. I don't think you should, I said. Callum. Not because I hate you. I want to be clear about that. I don't. I meant this. The anger had moved through me and left something quieter in its place. Not coldness, but the equanimity of a man who has finished examining a failed structure and accepted what the examination showed him. I think we've been unhealthy for a long time. I think we've both known it. And I think you made a decision when you packed that bag, whether or not you understand it that way. I just helped you commit to it. You're punishing me. I'm accepting reality. There's a difference. She was crying. I could hear it in the quality of the silence on the line. Not dramatic, not performed, but real. And I felt it, genuinely, as something that mattered. Her pain was not nothing to me. 5 years of marriage does not become nothing. But it also does not become a reason to rebuild something on a foundation that has failed. "I'm sorry," she said, very quietly. "I know." And then, because it was true, and she deserved to hear a true thing, "I'm sorry too. Not for how I handled it, but for all the ways this went wrong that neither of us fully dealt with until now." I heard her breathing on the other end of the line. "What happens now?" she asked. "I'll have my lawyer call your lawyer next week," I said. "We'll be fair about all of it. I don't intend to be difficult." A pause. "And Sarah, for what it's worth, I hope you find what you're looking for. I mean that without any irony." I hung up. I sat at the desk for a while with my hands flat on the drainage plans, feeling the particular, terrible freeing weight of a door closing all the way. 3 weeks later, I met Reed for coffee again, not because of any unresolved business, but because he called and said simply, "I could use someone to talk to who actually understands the situation," which is the most honest invitation I can think of, and I respected him for it. He'd made a decision. He and Naira were separating. He had engaged a mediator, and they were working out a co-parenting arrangement for Lyra that he was determined to make as stable as possible. "She's doing well," he said, about his daughter. "She's 6. She doesn't fully understand what's happening, but she knows something has changed, and she asked me last week if I was sad." He paused. "I told her yes, but that I was going to be okay, and that she was going to be okay, and I meant both of those things." "Good," I said. "That's the right answer." "Is it?" He looked at me with the careful interest of a man who values accuracy. "How do you know?" "Because it's honest," I said. "Because it doesn't pretend things are fine when they aren't, and it doesn't drown her in something she can't carry. It gives her the truth in the size she can hold." Reed was quiet for a moment. "The truth in the size she can hold," he repeated. "I like that." He turned his coffee cup in his hands. "What about you? How are you doing?" I thought about the question honestly, the way I'd been trying to do with most things since that Sunday morning with the pancakes and the spatula and the roller bag in the hallway. I thought about the apartment, which had gradually stopped feeling like an absence and started feeling like a beginning. I thought about the drainage project, which had hit a genuinely interesting technical problem in the northeast quadrant that Marcus and I had spent 3 intense days solving, and how good it had felt to be absorbed completely in a thing that required precision and focus and had nothing to do with grief. "I'm doing the work," I said. "It's not comfortable, but it's honest, and I think honest is the only direction worth moving." Reed looked at me for a moment, and something in his expression shifted. An acknowledgement, man to man, of the specific kind of difficult that this particular kind of grief requires. Not sympathy exactly, recognition. "Too honest," he said, lifting his cup. "Too honest," I said, and meant it completely. There is a concept in structural engineering called resilient design. The idea that a structure should be built not merely to resist failure, but to withstand it, to absorb impact and recover function rather than simply collapse. It is the difference between a building that shatters under earthquake load and one that bends, flexes, distributes the force through its bones, and stands when the shaking stops. I think about that sometimes, in the months since the morning Sarah packed her bag. I think about the fact that the most important thing I did that day was not dramatic. It was not loud. It was not the kind of thing that makes a good story if what you're looking for is spectacle. I helped my wife zip her suitcase. I folded her favorite sweater carefully into the front pocket. I wished her well, and I meant it. And in doing those things, in refusing to become the version of myself that she had prepared herself for, I did the only thing I know how to do with structural failure. I stopped pretending the cracks weren't there. I stopped adding load to a foundation that couldn't carry it. And I stepped back and let the thing that was already failing finally fall. That is not a triumph. I want to be clear about that. There was no victory in it, no satisfaction in having been the composed one, No prize at the end of the silence. What there was and what there remains is this: the quiet, unglamorous, genuinely hard work of building something new on ground that is, at last, honest. Reed calls every couple of weeks. Marcus continues to drop files on my desk without ceremony and ask pointed questions. Lyra, Reed's daughter, apparently told her father recently that she wants to be an engineer when she grows up, which he reported with the kind of bewildered pride that is its own argument for continuing. As for me, I am an engineer. I design systems that carry water safely through cities, that keep the pressure from accumulating in places that can't hold it, that give the force somewhere to go that isn't destructive. I am, slowly and with great effort and occasional failure, learning to apply that same principle to myself. The morning she packed her bags, I made pancakes. They were good. That still seems important. I'm not entirely sure why, but I think it has something to do with the fact that ordinary life does not stop for private devastation, that the butter still browns, and the light still comes through the window, and the body still requires feeding, and somewhere in that relentless, impersonal continuity, there is something that functions like grace. The bags are gone. The door is closed. The building is standing. That is enough. For now, that is more than enough. End.